For more than 125 years, the Southend Standard, and more recently, the Evening Echo, have kept us informed of local events and news. We may well remember some of those events, but others will have been lost in the mists of time. So let's sit back and enjoy an hour of nostalgia as we relive some of those events recalled by Southend people with archived film and photographs, as well as stories featured in the pages of the Southend Standard and the Evening Echo. On May the 9th, 1873, Henry George Savage published the first edition of the original Southend Standard. His office and works were in the basement of Albion House in Old Southend Road. 2 years later, Henry Savage sold the Southend Standard and his presses for £150. For the next 7 years, the paper was passed from one proprietor to another, each with differing ideas on how to develop the paper and increase its circulation. In May 1878, John Osborne bought the paper and published it from Alexander Street, where the present Woolworths store stands. Finally, in April 1882, the paper was bought by Charles Baker and John Henry Burroughs. J.H. Burroughs was a keen businessman and journalist, and he soon bought out his partner, gaining sole control of the paper. He instinctively knew what the public wanted from a local newspaper. He rapidly gained their support for his Southend Standard, with increased coverage of local events. More space was needed. In 1885, J.H. Burroughs moved to Clifftown Road. A greengrocer's shop was purchased and used while the Standard Printing Works was built. In 1903, the building was renamed Standard House, and for many years it was the focal point for news distribution in the town. J.H. Burroughs and Sons Limited was always at the forefront of printing technology, introducing photogravure pictures to the paper and operating 100-ton Goss rotary presses such as this. In the days of hot metal, an impressive row of linotype machines produced the type. The pages of the Southend Standard reflected every major event in the town. Visits of the Home Fleet, the shooting down of Zeppelin L-15 in 1916, bomb damage in Hamlet Court Road, royal visits, such as the Duke of York, later King George VI, when he opened Priory Park in 1920. The Duchess of York, now Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, to lay the foundation stone of the new General Hospital in 1929. The eventual opening of Southend General Hospital in 1932. The Second World War and Winston Churchill at Shoebury. A bombed bungalow at Canby. Bomb damage at Southend Boys High School. The evacuation of school children. And the launch of naval craft at Johnson & Jago's yard at Lee Creek. And happier times, such as the opening of Southend United's new home at Roots Hall in 1955. The excitement and glamour of carnival time. And the glittering summer shows. In 1964, after 82 years, the Burroughs years came to an end. John H. Burroughs and Sons Limited amalgamated with the Merritt and Hatcher Group. Many changes in style and content were made, and for the first time since the Standard started, news and pictures appeared on the front page. Monday, 29th of September 1969, saw the launch of sister paper, the Evening Echo. When the new Hammerson shopping centre was built in the late 60s, it swept away much of the Edwardian charm of Victoria Circus. Gone was the distinctive white, blue and orange clock tower over Garron's Corner and the Victoria Public House. Gone too was the Towser Arcade, with its distinctive smells and sawdust-covered passageways. Joan Cotgrove.
I can vividly picture before this wretched precinct came in, which I think was a disaster, Starting from the Victoria Circus end, there was Dixon's on the corner. We used to go in there. The Hotel Victoria on the corner. Garen's places, yes. I can remember just when there was a tram terminus in Victoria Circus and a funny sort of wooden shelter with a clock on it. Just remember it. For a while there were parking meters in the High Street, and you could actually park outside for a short while, some of the stores, but that all stopped. Keddies. And all the funny little shops going down. There was a tobacconist, and I can remember they used to advertise that the cigars were kept in a humidor, I suppose. I don't know, but all those funny little shops down there, and Soapers, Thomas's, and when you pulled the money went into a little screw thing, and they pulled a little chain, and it used to go whizzing across, going ding 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 all the way. Great fun, lovely. And you always saw people you knew. It was quite amazing. Literally every few yards you'd see somebody. Yes. We used to reckon it took us on a Saturday morning 2 hours to walk down the High Street, because we used to meet so many people we knew. And we'd either meet in Thomas's or the Garen's restaurant by the cinema underneath the banqueting hall. The banqueting hall was really quite something to see. I think lots of glass and wood, and that was quite fun. And I can remember they had what you'd call a delicatessen now, but I don't know what it was called then, next door to where the cinema and the banqueting hall and the big cafe was. And this window used to be full of all sorts of goodies, Bath chaps and hams and all exotic foods. And I used to stand with my nose pressed up to it, not really knowing what a Bath chap was. Garen's had another grill room restaurant near the bridge, and down below there was a funny barber's shop. You had to go downstairs to it. That used to fascinate me, because my brother used to go down and have his hair cut down there, and I can remember for a time that I used to. After a little boy at school cut off one of my plaits when he was sitting behind me, and I then had to go and have it cut short. Garen's under the bridge, going down the stairs. Funny men in there they were.
Dixons present these new frocks for Easter and spring.
In novelty border printed all silk crepe de chine, a young jaunty style, perfectly cut, 63 shillings. This extremely smart frock in fancy wall georgette with attractive handwork on the front and newest effect sleeves, 42 shillings. A smart style for the junior miss, made in fancy angora in the newest colourings. Smart sleeves and the newest fan pleats on the skirt add to the attractiveness of this frock. Only 29 and 6.
Hats for Easter. 5 large windows showing the latest for Easter. And remember, Dixons specialise in WX, OS and extra OS garments. Miss Amore, buyer for all the fashion departments at Dixons, says,
This season I'm catering more than ever for the OS and XOS figure, and a large section of my showroom will be devoted to these sizes.
Come to Dixons, the fashion store, Victoria Circus, Southend.
In 1973, the family-run store shocked Southend Standard readers with this announcement.
Dixons Farewell is a goodbye for Hammerson. Dixons, for 60 years the family store of Southend, is closing. The choice site on the corner of Victoria Circus has been bought by Hammerson Development Company. Mr. Dixon has already told 200 workers that they'll lose their jobs. It was a hard task, he said, after we had planned to celebrate the diamond centenary of the business.
As the redevelopment got underway, other old high street favourites bowed out.
Another family firm goes. Offord's caterers and bakers are closing down later this month. The family business has been sold to developers for a price believed to be around £500,000. Offord's started as a bakery in Hackney in the last century. 5 Offord brothers opened their restaurant in 1924.
Regular visitors to Offord's were Eric and Pauline Evans.
Yes.
Well, we liked to go to, used to go quite regularly, and the restaurant was upstairs, and downstairs you used to buy cakes and bread and such like, didn't you, like an ordinary baker's shop.
Yeah.
That's something else which was...
We used to go there,
We used to go there a lot, and so many people missed it when it went.
Lovely
It was
restaurant.
a lovely restaurant, the old-fashioned type.
And they did lovely roast beef with horseradish
lovely
sauce.
meal, and, you know, the old-fashioned atmosphere there was there.
We often used to
But
go there on a
always
Sunday.
good food, you know, well served, and, you know, you were looked after up there.
And they had a shop on the seafront as well.
Pauline Evans remembers a rather different kind of meal.
Well, sometimes I'd get home from school and my mother would be having a good old clean up and she'd say, would you mind going down the pie shop today? I've no time to do the dinner. So I'd say, oh, yes, please. And she'd give me 6pence and I'd go down and I'd have 1 pie, which was enough for a child, and the mash and the liquor for 5pence. Well, the other penny, I'd go over to Ross's for an ice cream. That was me afters. When I was about 12, you know.
Ross's was a popular spot with the lads as well. Eric Evans.
Now, all the lads used to meet in there on a Saturday morning and a Sunday morning. It was kind of a joint meeting place, and chat to the girls and so forth, and have coffee and so forth. But it was sort of, it's same lads kicking their heels around the street corners, you know, they all used to meet in there, and as I say, because all Ross's is gone, I mean, there was the one up on the corner of Clifftown Road, which is now a linen shop. They were there for years, weren't they, the Rosses?
Well, they were the place. The Curzon and Ross's and Sunday night pictures. That was our youth.
Another well-known restaurant at the bottom of the high street was Cotgrove's. Joan Cotgrove.
Cotgrove started about 1890 as a fish and chip shop with an open front, and not just sort of fish and chips, but lobsters and crabs and all beautiful seafood, all sort of all banked up in the front. Then in the 30s they opened up a fish and chip takeaway, and that was there until the war. Well, during the war, the army moved in. Then when he opened up again, in those days they only opened in the summer, closed for the winter. There was enough going on in the town, and the town used to be absolutely packed. High Street used to be just a solid throng, people pouring off the trains. So you only stayed open during the summer until, I suppose, the end of the lights. Then you closed for the winter. Then eventually people's tastes changed and they started opening all the year round, and then had a rather nice grill room, and that was very popular. The trade was still coming in. It was a different trade, of course. It wasn't the old going down to the seafront passing trade. I think Ilford must have been empty on a Sunday, because we had lots and lots of Jewish people on a Sunday evening. It was just as though one village had moved entirely into Cotgrove's for the evening. That was lovely, actually. It was a very nice atmosphere.
In times of conflict, Southend's strategic position has given it a major role in the defence of the country. In the Second World War, a special relationship built up between the town and the flyers at Rochford.
22nd of April, 1971. Town bond with RAF. Southend cemented its bond of friendship with the RAF's 54 Squadron on Friday, almost 30 years to the day when the squadron's Spitfires arrived at Southend in 1941. In a ceremony at the airport, Southend's Mayor, Alderman Mick Schofield, presented Wing Commander Raymond Bannard with a scroll and the town's coat of arms after inspecting officers and men of the squadron. Wing Commander Bannard presented the Mayor with the squadron's crest, its motto, "Boldness Prevails." Wing Commander Bannard told the Mayor, "History does not record the welcome extended to our Spitfire pilots when they arrived here 30 years ago, but it could not have surpassed today's warm reception. Many are disappointed that none of our aircraft are on the ground for you to see at close quarters. But it's the price of progress that modern fighters have grown so fast and complex that planes like the Phantom could not land within this airfield with absolute safety." The squadron moved to Rochford Airdrome on March the 30th, 1941 from Hornchurch, where it carried out convoy escort duties. Flying from Rochford, its Spitfires notched up their 100th kill on April 17th, 1941. 6 of the squadron's Phantom fighter bombers flew over with split-second precision as the ceremony finished.
Southend had an opportunity to show its patriotism once more in 1954 when thousands of holidaymakers and local people besieged the pier to witness the arrival in the Thames estuary of the Royal Yacht Britannia. On board was the recently crowned Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip.
Seaborne Welcome Home for the Queen by Southend. Southend Pierhead proved a popular grandstand to watch the royal yacht. Over 6,000 people went on the pier and 848 travelled in the Southend Little Boat Flotilla. After the royal yacht had gone, many visitors enjoyed dancing at the pierhead and participated in the special BBC broadcast. They heard John Ellison pay a tribute to the warmth of Southend's welcome and the arrangements made by the corporation for the flotilla. In the evening, over 400 people danced to Eric Winston and his orchestra in the pier pavilion.
Southend has had its fair share of disasters and accidents. Until August 19th, 1937, the Floral Hall was a well-known local landmark.
Floral Hall destroyed by fire. Paramount Follies artistes lose their clothes. The Floral Hall, the municipally owned place of amusement among the trees on the western esplanade, was completely destroyed by fire on Saturday afternoon between 5 and 6 o'clock. 3/4 of an hour after the outbreak occurred, nothing remained of the building but a charred mass upon the ground, surmounted by a skeleton of steel uprights and cross girders. Hundreds of people gathered on the lower esplanade and saw the flames roar through the building, giving off a heat which scorched the surrounding trees. Many residents and visitors saw the smoke from the esplanade beyond Thorpe Bay and also from Lee. Crowds who were attracted to the fire were kept back by the police, although they could not in any case approach near the burning building on account of the intense heat. After the roof had fallen in, the wooden walls collapsed in showers of sparks. Blazing timbers rolled down the grass slope towards the esplanade. The front of the building fell in 2 parts, each with a crash and a roar as the flames leapt up again round the splintering wood. The fire brigade received the call at 5 p.m., and when it was known that it was to the Floral Hall, the call was made a general one. 5 engines, 4 from Southend and 1 from Lee, attended under the chief officer, Mr. Percy Garron. Pumps set to work from Clifftown Parade, Westcliff Parade and Wilson Road. Most of the time the brigade worked in the rain. The fire was so firmly established that the hoses had little effect, and the work of the brigade consisted mainly of damping down the fire after the building was burned out. Clouds of smoke and steam rose from the blackened debris long after the flames had been conquered. The brigade later pulled down those parts of the building which were still standing and appeared to be in danger from falling. Stage property of very considerable value, including costumes, sets, accordions and other band instruments, the property of the Paramount Follies Company, were destroyed. The fire is thought to have started in a dressing room.
Autumn 1938 brought disaster to the town when severe gales lashed the coast. Damage running into thousands of pounds was caused as trees and buildings along the coast were blown down. Rough seas washed ships ashore, and the corporation and gasworks jetty were damaged. Ted Izod recalls that day.
We'd had some very, very high winds blowing into the town. And I remember that I decided to go down onto the seafront just to see what had been happening. And as I went up onto the seawall, I just could not believe what I saw. Barges had been driven ashore by the force of the wind and the force of the current of the Thames. The anchors had dragged with every heavy wave that came inshore, so it washed these boats farther and farther along the jetties, farther along the pavement, and up onto the sea wall. The tide receded, and when it went out, well, then you could really appreciate what had happened. There was matchwood everywhere, ropes tangled up with pieces of masts. Boats were standing waterlogged. The bigger ones were absolutely immovable. The main trouble with the Thames barges was the fact that the waves had washed into the barges, they'd filled with water, and they'd become absolutely dead weight onto the sand so that they couldn't be dragged off. These were the real problems because they were big, they were hefty. There were one or two so close inshore that you could have stepped off from the kiosks going along the Marine Parade and almost stepped on board these Thames barges. And the masts had broken. Some of the masts were leaning over the ships and fallen over onto some of the jetties so that they'd smashed the jetty completely. It's a job to describe the chaos that was there, because it was chaos.
On 5th of February 1953, the Standard carried the news of the East Coast floods. Actress Peggy Mount, then a resident of Lee, recalls how that terrible night began in the old town.
His name was Scoppy, as far as, or they used to call him Scoppy Osborne. He was a very old boy, and one night he wouldn't go to bed. And they said, "Come on, Dad." "No, I'm not going to bed," he said. "Something's going to happen. I'm not going to bed." And he wouldn't go to bed. And that was the night that the flood started in Canvey, and the water literally crept up over the I think it's Bay Wharf, no, Bell Wharf, of course it was. And that water came right up, and because of the old boy, it saved an awful lot of lives and an awful lot of trouble. That's when they had those incredible floods.
Reporter David Jones was on the scene almost from the start, and it was his graphic stories of the devastation that filled the pages of the Standard.
Night merged into day once more, and still the rescue workers, many of whom had not slept since their awakenings at 1:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, worked on. Speaking to Lieutenant Nesbitt in his flood-surrounded Salvation Army hut, he told me how he had helped several people out the previous evening. The Baptist church had first been used as a rest centre, but finally the water had driven them out. I did not see Mr. Hodgson, the minister, until the next day, when I saw him helping refugees. Along the sea wall, churned by 1,000 feet, were squads of men filling sacks with black mud and piling them into the huge gaps that had been torn in the sea wall. In the Newlands area, I frequently passed half-submerged bungalows with all their doors and windows securely fastened. I wonder what they will find in there when they open them up. Then I saw a jagged hole that had been smashed in a roof. At least it looks as though someone had a chance. One army corporal, whom I later found had been rushed with other troops from their Orsett camp, seemed to have an inexhaustible supply of energy as he carried the injured from badly hit Newlands and other sunken marsh areas. Beyond him, I saw the sea wall, and from its top I looked down on a sight that struck fear in my heart. Along the flooded streets, craft of every description had been paddled. Now and again, I could see them steer near to a partly submerged house, and sometimes their calls of "Anyone there?" were answered. Most times, they were not. Things had definitely improved on the island by Monday, although the fleet of little boats were still pulling people from attics and roofs of their flooded homes.
There were many courageous rescues and examples of remarkable bravery. Peggy Mount.
There was a wonderful man who was very much part of our lives at home, Brubbs Bridge. Have you heard of Brubbs Bridge? He was a wonderful person. We all loved him dearly. And he told me that he went out with his long boat saving people from Canby who were, you know, trapped in there. And he said, I could hear singing, and I thought to myself, I'm going balmy. But he said, I could hear singing, and I turned the boat around and I rowed towards it. And he said there was one house with the attic just above water. And he went in and there were two old people there. He was a cripple and she'd got him up the first floor, then she'd got him up to the bedroom, and somehow or other she'd got him up to the attic. And they were singing hymns, and they said, oh, we knew God would send someone. And he put these two old folk in his boat and brought them home. But things like that happened all the time in those floods. Dear Brubbs.
From disaster by water to disaster by fire, there have been several devastating fires on Southend Pier. The night of July 30th, 1976 is a night Police Constable Alan Watkins will never forget.
Yeah, well, on that particular night, myself and one other police constable, John Batchelor, were on Panda Car patrol at Shoebury Ness, in actual fact. And of course we heard the messages going out on the radio that there was in fact a lot of smoke rising up from the pier head. When we drove from Shoebury into the area of the pier itself, there was a lot of interest by now. There was a lot of people on holiday, day trippers, local people I would imagine, on the seafront at the time, because it was early evening. There was certainly an awful lot of cars had driven down there and stopped people hanging over the seawall and taking every vantage point they possibly could to get a good view of the fire and what was going on. But of course it was a mile and a quarter out to sea, wasn't it?
Councillors Mick and Beryl Schofield, who both served the town as mayor, were soon aware of the disaster. Beryl Schofield.
We were in council at the time, both Mick and I, and we looked out of the window. Said there's a terrible fire there, and we realised that it was level with the pier because it was a long way out. And somebody said it's the pier. So at the end of the council meeting, Mick and I went down in the car, down to the beginning of the pier, both of us, because he was the chairman of the committee that had the pier. It was quite something to see this place burning there, and it was raging quite a lot.
The police were deployed in support of the fire and rescue services. Alan Watkins.
The officer in charge, and I believe from my recollection it was Charlie Harper, who was the Chief Inspector on Southend Police Division at that time, directed us to go to the pier head, anticipating that there would be a lot of interest from the public and the media. There was emergency services gathering to make their way down to the far end. They had no problem getting there. I believe they came up on the trains that were running at that particular time with certain equipment, and because we had a mini Panda car, we were able to drive onto the pier and drove all the way down the walkway, in actual fact. And I seem to recall that as we reached the end of the pier, you know, there was a great deal of flame by then as well. You just couldn't really see the pier head itself. It was smoke logged, I think the fire brigade called it, and yes, there was certainly a great deal of flame coming from the midst of the smoke. Couldn't get anywhere near it, of course, you know. It was too intense.
Mick and Beryl Schofield inspected the scene and gave what help they could.
So we were taken up, and we saw the uselessness of it, where there was absolutely no water whatsoever. It was the lowest tide I have ever seen, ever. I happened, you know, you don't often go up and look at the tide, but there was no water at all at the end of the pier. And these pipes that went down had to catch the water to be able to bring them up to sprinkle them. They didn't work unless they were in water, and they weren't. So, I mean, everything was against it. We were then taken into the lifeboat house and just watched it. And Mick and I were there and we said, this is ridiculous. We're here, we're doing absolutely nothing towards it. There must be something we can do. But we went back to the pub part, which was you could still walk on, and said, have they had anything to eat? So, well, you know, we've got some food, we haven't got very much. So there were 4 of us that went back. We went back down the pier, back to the Cliffs Pavilion, and we raided the larder there. And we made sandwiches, we made soup, and we put those in a van and took them up the pier and fed the firemen.
Gradually, more help arrived. Alan Watkins.
The plane turned up with this, I believe it was a crop sprayer, wasn't it, that turned up eventually and started spraying water onto the part of the pier that was burning. I seem to remember that there were tugs that turned up eventually and were spraying water onto the fire. We really stayed there as in a security role, trying to stop anybody that didn't really have a right to be there, while the emergency services went about their business in trying to extinguish this fire, which obviously by now was raging quite well.
By the next morning, the smoke had cleared and the full extent of the damage could be seen. In less than a week, the pier was again open to the public. Crowds flocked to the pierhead to view the charred and twisted remains for themselves. Throughout the summer months, Southend's beaches, the Golden Mile, the pier and the Kurzel were packed as daily thousands of trippers descended on the town. They came by rail, by steamer, by coach and even on bicycles to enjoy the sun and fun of the seaside. Comedian and actor Michael Benteen.
You'd have the Sharras used to come down, Sharabonks, Sharabangs. They were open-topped, soft-topped buses with all the Maybritches and the Dorrises, all with the hats with Kiss Me Quick on and things. And they used to come down from the East End of London for a big day, to bring their own beer with them. They used to come down for a big day, and they used to eat all the whelks and the winkles and the cockles, and very nice they were too.
Rosie Donovan and Joyce Scaines often came down from their homes in the East End of London for day trips and the occasional holiday.
I was 8 when the war started and we were 14 when it finished.
Yeah, 14, yeah.
14 as it finished, so that's the time when you started to go Southend, isn't it? You know what I mean?
And that was where we went for our first week's holiday after the war. Would have been in, well, I would have been 14 then. Yes. And the first year after the war, my father said, well, we must have a holiday. And Southend was the nearest, so we booked up for just in a bed and breakfast house. And we went there for a week and thoroughly enjoyed it, and thought how fortunate we was as well, that we'd come through the war without any scratches. And here we was enjoying a week's holiday at Southend. and our relatives came down for the day from the East End to see us there, as though we was miles away. But because you wouldn't remember, would you, the fact that you never had water in the bedroom where you stayed. You wouldn't remember that, would you? That my father used to go down. You had a bowl and a jug on the washstand, as it was called then, and the father would go down for one jug. You just had one jug of hot water. They would let you have, and he mainly got that for his shaving, because it was all, you know, like, so it wasn't the electric shaver, for shaving, and we used to share that water for washing facilities. Talking about the bed and breakfast. That was the most popular resort though, wasn't it?
Right.
Yes. Westcliff was considered as
Select.
That's the
Very
word.
select.
Area. Westcliff.
Very
you never
select.
we never
Westcliff was always the select end.
I don't think our parents would have even have gone to Westcliff at all. You wouldn't
that
think.
way.
You
We
went
walked
down
that
that street and you turned left.
Turned
Down to
left
the Curzon.
towards the Curzon was the East Enders end, and the other way
the
was.
pubs along the front as well.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's where they used to have the
Well, I
piano
think-
would be going
that's
and the
right.
sing-song, because that's where they would stop off, and some of them just stay there all day until they got the train back home again. They wouldn't get as far as the Curzon. Of an afternoon, my father would go, when I was there with my parents, of course, my father would go and get a jug of tea for the beach. There was little stalls along the top of the beach, wasn't there, on the edge of the pavement there. There was lots of little just stalls. And he used to go and get a tray of tea, a tray with a jug of tea and the caps, and probably a few biscuits or something. But that was a great delight. The smell, that tea always smelled something special, because it was out in the open, down by the sea. Really look forward to whatever time it was that you could only have one. You couldn't have more than one because it couldn't be afforded.
Michael Benteen.
But the great fun was the winkles and the whelks and the cockles. And Jack Waters, who of course everybody knew as Jack Warner, but we knew as Jack Waters because we knew he and his sisters for years. A lovely man. He used to say, I always come down here for the eels, jellied eels. And jolly good they were too. And that was funny. It was more the jellied eels and the hot eels in the sort of eel stew, which is how it's depicted. Oh, jellied eels, delicious. Yeah, it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And wonderful ice cream. It was a soft ice cream down here called Hokey Pokey. Marvellous. Never seen it since. I mean, it's probably been condemned as unhygienic.
The illuminations along Southend's Golden Mile attracted parties by the coachload during those hectic summer months. Mickey Strauss, a prominent local seafront trader, recalls a typical Saturday night.
I remember I used to go in the Minerva pub. And I know this for a fact. On a Saturday night, they used to open at 6. The late Manny DeVito run it, when I knew Manny DeVito, And on the minute of opening, he'd have 500 pints lined up behind his bars, ready. 500 pints. And Larry Gaines used to play in there, the old ex-heavyweight champion. He used to have a band in there. And he used to, God no, I think, man, he used to have 20 staff in the Minerva on a Saturday night in the illuminations. Because there's a drink in the streets in those days as well. And there wasn't no fights. 500 pints of beer. And it was great.
And if it started to rain, there were always the theatres and cinemas. At one time, there were 8 in the High Street alone. In addition to its popular restaurants and cafes, the Garron family also owned Garron's Imperial Bioscope. Eric Evans.
It was all on one level. There was no balcony or anything. It was owned by Garron's.
It was 9 pence.
And it was 9 pence and sit anywhere, you know, because some people prefer to sit near the screen than others. And it's 9 pence to sit anywhere. And I know a friend of mine at a particular time was out at work, and he used to go there. And he used to say, you know, when you go in the cinema, first of all, in the dark, you can't see a thing because it's dark. But after a while, you can sort of see. He used to say, all the old girls and all the old boys used to get in there. He said it was like a bloody game of drafts. He said they'd be moving about all over the place to go and sit next to some old girl, or she didn't like it, so she'd get up and move. He said it was just like a game of drafts in there, he said, on a Sunday afternoon matinee.
In February 1929, the closure was announced of Luca's Brewery, situated between the Central Railway Station and Garron Cinema. The brewery buildings were demolished to make way for the town's largest and most lavish cinema building, the Astoria. Pauline Evans.
Because I can remember the Odeon, which was the Astoria, I watched that being built more or less, because my dentist was right opposite, and I saw them dismantling the brewery that was there in order to build the Astoria, which eventually became the Odeon. And it was a magnificent place, you know, with double staircase and a big restaurant upstairs. It was really a beautiful place, the Odeon, and the staff was so smart.
From the first notice to appear in the Southend Standard to the opening day, the Astoria captured the imaginations of Southenders. By 2 o'clock, queues for the premiere had begun to form around the new building, and by 6 o'clock, the crowds of onlookers made the High Street impassable. At the premiere show, the Astoria was officially opened by the Mayor of Southend, Councillor A.T. Edwards, who was greeted by 3,000 people. The opening programme was hailed as the greatest show in Southend's history. The main feature on opening night was Brewster's Millions, starring Jack Buchanan. On the stage, Francis A. Mangan presented The Black Pearl with Doris Niles, the St Helier Sisters, the Mangan Ensemble, and the Corps de Ballet. In addition, on the screen was a Silly Symphony, British Movietone News, and Gaumont British Magazine. Commencing the following day, programmes were continuous daily at 12:30 till 11 p.m, Sunday 8 till 10:30 p.m. Admission prices were 9 pence, 1 and 6, and half a crown. On 12th of May 1937, the coronation of King George VI was relayed directly to the Astoria at 10 a.m, with all admission charges going to charity. During 1944, the cinema was purchased by the Rank Organisation and renamed the Odeon. It became one of the top venues outside the West End. Top stars from around the world were booked to appear on the massive stage. The cafe was later converted into the Victor Sylvester Dance Studio. In 1970, the cinema closed again and reopened completely modernised as Odeons 1 and 2, with a new, smaller entrance in Elmer Approach. Now the cinema is closed, and its future uncertain. As part of the Carnival fundraising, celebrated Astoria cinema organist Guy Hindle and local baritone Herbert Sharp made a recording of the carnival song Southend is Calling, which was played as Carnival Queen Miss Evelyn Vaughan was crowned on stage at the Astoria.
The bells are ringing out to say to everyone, oh come and join us fun. To say to everyone, oh come and join us fun. Southend calling, Southend is calling. Carnival is on parade. Celebration, illumination, is the day of masquerade. Leave your sorrow until tomorrow. Joy and laughter reign today. Frills and laces and painted faces, 'tis the day of the big masquerade. Queen of Beauty, she will ride, maids of honor by her side. Indian Raja's Chinese blue, visitors girl from Honolulu. Soldiers dressed in gold and gray, wonder shows from every trade. 20 bands will join that mighty cavalcade. Southend calling, Southend is calling. Carnival is on parade. Celebration, illumination, 'tis the day of the big masquerade. Southend calling, Southend is calling. Carnival is on parade. Celebration, illumination, 'tis the day of the big masquerade.
Eric and Pauline Evans.
You know, Southend was such a nice place in those days. It really was. And of course the carnivals were fantastic. They really were.
See, the carnivals in those days and before the war was run for the benefit of our own hospital. All proceeds went to our Southend Hospital. That's why there was so much enthusiasm.
There used to be about 5 all bands march with them. And then all the floats were beautiful, you know, how they used to do them up. And it'd take you, what, a couple of hours to watch it?
Yeah. But all the week you saw people walking around dressed up in clowns and various costumes, cycling around, because bikes were very prominent in those days, decorate their bikes up, cycle around, all collecting with their own collection boxes. Chalkwood Park used to have functions on, they used to have baby competitions. There's dances on all the week in various different spots, and everybody sort of entered into it with enthusiasm and zest.
And the carnival queens were really lovely girls, you know, like
Women,
film
not
stars
girls.
they were.
For many years, C.J. Morehouse and the Kersal staff were prime supporters of carnival activities. The late John Crowley was company secretary at the Kersal until it finally closed in the 80s. John Crowley.
We built the Carnival Queen's coach and various other things because we had the facilities to do this sort of thing. Mr. Morehouse was the vice chairman and I was the on-publicity officer for Carnival for many years. And in those days we really took a lot of money, a lot of money, the Carnival I mean. And we brought, I like to say we brought a lot of new things to the Carnival. We did actually, because Teddy Longman, Alderman Longman was the chairman of Carnival then. Very nice old chap. We said we'll have a band for the week and pay for it, a big band like the Vancouver Boys Band, 40 of them, you know. We march it all around the town all through the week. We took the Carnival Queen State Drive, we called it, to Shoebury, another one to Lee, and another one to Westcliff, with the band on a Wednesday afternoon. It stopped all the traffic. But people liked it. It was great. It put Carnival on the map a bit more. Somewhere along the way we built the Kersal Flyer. That was that huge train which was based on the locomotive in a 20th Century Fox film.
The film was Ticket to Tomahawk, and it provided the Kersal with its most spectacular travelling advertisement. John Crowley.
We used to put an exhibit in Carnival every year. We used to sit round the table in the boardroom and dream it up between us. We had a showboat, and we had a long flat top articulated vehicle, and on it we had two swings swinging with pretty girls in there, that sort of thing. And then we had a large yacht with the mast down. That didn't go down very well because the mast was laid along, but it was a magnificent thing. And then I thought of this. Well, I'd seen this picture with Betty Grable, and I fancied this engine. I wrote off to the film company and I said, could I have some stills? I was thinking of building it for a carnival. And they wrote back and said, yeah, sure. They sent me about a dozen stills, and our architect, Spink, who is now dead, he drew it, and we built it. And we found a small organ, which is very difficult, a Chiappi Italian organ, electrically played with the drums and a little conductor going like that. Played all these, no business like show business, fabulous thing. And we got tremendous publicity from it, although you can never gauge what worth is publicity, but lots of people knew of it and liked it. And that became so popular that big stores used to ring us up. It was borrowed by Gamages, remember Gamages? Selfridges, for publicity runs around London. And we had to get a special permit from the LCC, as it was in those days, to run it through London as an advertising vehicle. And it used to make headlines wherever it went. It was a fabulous thing. We used to take it to other carnivals, and we took it across to France, to Calais, to their carnival. That would have been worth thousands of pounds now. Of course, one little boy of 10 paid the whole of that. He set fire to the whole garage, and that went. Together with a little cub as well, the Castle Cub. We never built another one after that went.
But that wasn't the end of the story. The Kersal Flyer is back. It was launched at the Cliffs Bandstage on 2nd of August 1997.
Over the music, just about. First of all, can I welcome you here to this, the official, if you like, press and sponsorship launch for the 1990 version of the Kersal Flyer. It had its maiden run this morning, believe it or not, at 4 o'clock this morning. There was ourselves, a police escort, half the park department staff, backup tractor. It worked superbly well. It went over the humps, you'd be pleased to know, on the seafront. We had to take the long route, literally all the way along Western Esplanade, back up along Station Road, down the wrong way on certain streets to get here by about 5:20, but it was really worth it.
This is very much an opportunity to put it on the line to the people that have actually done all the work with this. There are numerous, but most importantly, everybody's been very enthusiastic. If I said straight away, our main sponsors, which are 3 groups, Mr. Morehouse, Mr. Stack from Row Allen Group, and the Seafront Traders, all came to us to say we would like to get involved. Right in the early stages, we obviously needed to recognise where we might be able to build it, and we liked the whole idea being Southend in Bloom's community town. We liked the whole idea of getting somebody else in the town interested, and we approached the Palace Theatre, who've got the expertise, and I think you would agree, they've actually designed, drawn, painted, built, welded, cut and successfully produced for us exactly what we wanted. And thank you very much, Palace Theatre.
The new Kersal Flyer, the redevelopment of the Kersal itself, signals a new wave of optimism that is washing over the town. A desire to re-establish Southend as the premier seaside destination it used to be. We can't turn back the clock, but already the robust and lively spirit of the town is beginning to reassert itself. Perhaps future generations will come to enjoy the fun and excitement of visiting or living beside the seaside at Southend-on-Sea.